That explains a lot.
Wow.
Sorry about that. Can you hear us, Ron?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. So we've gotten started. There's nobody from the public, and we're gonna do attendance. So Ron,
Present.
Bob,
Here.
Joe,
Here.
Patrick,
Here.
Jason,
Here.
Scott will join us virtually. Michael, Ajit,
Here.
Lauren is, Dan is here for Lauren.
Here.
Rose here. Dan, yeah. Fred. Maura. Here. Susan. Brian.
Here.
Will, Grace, and Coral here. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna share my screen. We have some slides. So this is our agenda. We wanted to kick things off by doing a staff welcome. We have a new person joining us and we have a person returning. So Jeremy Walters is joining us as an associate research analyst. And if you want to take a minute or two to just introduce yourself.
I'll pick most of that. Hi, everyone. This is Jeremy. I'm one of the new research analysts here. Prior to this, I worked for San Francisco Public Schools and I worked in Boston, sort of the city level there. And I'm glad to meet you up.
Thank you, welcome. So he'll be joining us more at our future meetings. And then we're going to be, we have welcomed back Adriana, who is our project manager, to build the security on things. I'll let you just introduce yourself.
Okay. I Adriana, I think I met some of you while I was interning here last year, finishing my master's at UConn. So I'll be joining the group to do the project management for the security and conflict. Prior to my journey into the public sector, I spent a couple of years in privacy and security consulting in the private sector. So this project is going to be fun.
Welcome. Anybody have any questions or thoughts?
We're just so excited to have people on the team.
Yes,
So welcome.
for our growing team.
And Katie, just so you know, for attendance purposes, Fred just jumped on.
Oh. Cool. Okay, welcome Fred, thanks. Okay, so moving right along, so the first item we have is data requests. This is a recap of the requests that we have that are active, that are included in your board package. We have a lot happening, and we're plugging right along. I don't think we have any questions about these. Okay, but we do have updates on the disconnected youth program.
Should I offer them from back here? I can come.
You can project your
Yeah, I
voice.
can project my voice, but I can also walk up and sit a little closer. So as folks know, we've been working on this project that was put in statute, Public Act 24-45. The Disconnected Youth Report builds on the work that was conducted outside of state government by funded privately. We were offered generous support back in August to be able to do this work. And so we have been working in earnest with partners to produce what has been requested in the statute, which is an annual update of the Disconnected Youth Report that was published in the fall of 2023. I think on the next slide, this is like the requirements and what the report is expected to have. I think the next slide just has like where we are. So we have been working in earnest, and in earnest is like, thank you. I think we said thank you many times to everyone who's contributed, but we were able to bring together agencies right before the holidays for a workshop where there was the majority of the analytical results were put into a draft presentation for everyone to review. And the draft itself was put together just after the new year. So we had notified folks that we weren't going to do that January 1st deadline. This first go around, this was a Herculean effort that required everyone to really stretch and flex, and really appreciated everyone's contribution. So we also, there were two pre-release briefings that happened this week, one with the Connecticut Council for Municipalities, the other with the Kids Cabinet agencies, and we fielded some feedback from them. So what we have to do now, what's required for the handoff is that we've released the draft report, or the release report, it's no longer a draft, with an accompanying dashboard. And that the Boston Consulting Group has been working with us, has put together robust handover documentation. And as of last night, we are able to confirm that everything runs. The draft report, we've received feedback from agencies that have been willing to supply it. And we believe the report will be released within the next 1 to 2 weeks. There's just a couple probably internal editorial things that we need to handle here at the end. So we look forward to letting everyone know when that's sort of live and moving in the wild. And then the next phase is sort of, thinking through when we'll begin this work in earnest again, in this coming calendar year for next year, or, whether there might be adjustment to the deadline, we don't know. So, that's our update on the disconnected youth work. It has not been a small project, but the upshot of the project, I think, we're presenting on it next week at the Best Practices Conference in DC. And one of the things that I plan to sort of flag for everyone is that because of this big robust thing we did, nearly every agency has engaged out in data requests, and we've learned some of the nuances of different agencies' needs around participation, and also they've been a part of the process. Yeah. Any questions? Thoughts? Patrick?
I just make it, because it's a public meeting, make it public, right? I think the expectation is that future updates, or whatever schedule is ended up being required, will be not supported with outside funding and with outside consultant.
That is true. That is correct.
The expectation is that
Expectation, yeah.
our team here, one of the things myself as well, will be responsible for producing this report every year.
That is correct.
Okay.
And there are some strategies that we can talk about internally. We had a strategy before we knew we had resources for this current first iteration, which we may revert to that same plan. And I think that's something we can talk about in an upcoming meeting. But for now, the finish line is in sight.
And a follow-up on that is a question or just a observation that I'm hoping that the documentation regarding methodology and things like that from the consultant will be handed to us so that we will have the ability to perform our tasks.
So one thing I'll say that we started doing literally from the word go was to learn all of the ins and outs of their thought process and how they decided to make decisions, how they made some of their decisions. Because as most folks know, this was a report that originated outside of state government, but the statute sort of very specifically said follow the same methodology. So that's something we've been working on in earnest the entire time. And part of the sort of Woohoo celebration is that the code that they rewrote all of their code from a proprietary piece of software into R so that we could run as a state with the tools that we have available to us. And as I can confirm, as of yesterday at 6:30 p.m., that works. That was not a guarantee until yesterday. So the dashboard we have stood up and ready to go. We're just working on some statics, but that all works. So we have all of that can be confirmed as yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. On the record.
Just to confirm, just to piggyback on what Patrick was asking, the analysis of this work is not resting with the individual agencies, right?
Right, wait, no, yeah.
Our role still remains to pull the data for this analysis.
One thing we thought about is, if I'm permitting,
Yeah.
one thing we thought about is that in the coming year, depending on if the deadline gets adjusted, our original strategy was just to update the big number.
Yeah.
And then to think about using the current year to do this big match that we just went through. Since we have all the match data, one thing we thought about is to do the more complex physical modeling or the more complex analytical work that wasn't able to be accomplished in this time with the current data set that we have matched. We've gone through so much and we haven't even had a chance for agencies to really say, oh, here's what we're doing to actually move the needle on some of these things to measure change. And I think that that's a little irresponsible, but then just go back and match and say, oh, things are moving. Plus there's been, rightful feedback around the sort of the methodology that we'd like to address too. So one strategy we thought about was updating the big number and then potentially using the data set to do some more deep analytical work.
Great, I'd love to hear that. I do have to say, I think BCG listened to some of our
I think they did as well, yeah.
criticisms, and I think they made an effort to address them in what they released.
I agree.
And what they produced,
Yeah.
so I appreciate that. And I think given Obviously, this is very highly political, this particular report. So I think regardless of that, I think they've done a fair job to just put it out there in terms of what they see.
Yeah.
Because some of the things they're saying actually fly against the arguments, political arguments that are being made based on the numbers. So I think it's actually, I think they've just put them out there. I think there's a lot more to pick at. So I like the idea of like updating the big number and actually digging more into this data set.
I agree.
Without trying, because the big number can be updated just with SDE and census. You don't really need to match anything.
Right.
So,
But it's the deeper stuff that we're able to do with that newly connected concept and just really getting into that idea, the reconnection, which really we haven't been able to explore as much. I think that's really where people, those are the kinds of questions that keep coming up consistently. What happens if they're newly disconnected, or do they reconnect, and when and how? And those are questions we haven't explored yet, so. Thanks again. I can't say enough for all of your partnership. It's been a very long few months. We're almost there, so thank you. Oh, we don't have this. In the annotated notes, I put a link, but we don't have to, we can, do that. No. We'll have a device for it. I can share a link with everyone. We've made, so with the next thing on the agenda under data request is the updates for the data request form, which I can share as a link document for folks to take a look at. So back in our last meeting, I showed screenshots of the form as it stands and some of the changes that we were just going to make. And the changes are really honestly reordering the question. So we have questions going in order that as a reader, really forced me to, or anyone really, to jump around with what any requester was going to be doing. So Katie's projecting this, and we can probably make it a little bit bigger. We don't yet have the full formatting. This is sort of the full form and things regrouped. So the top of the form has some things in it, like just general things. How often will this be needed? Is this recurring? Some identifications. And then sections 2 and 3 and 4 are really where the meat of the project. We're asking for virtually the same questions. Describe your organization and describe the participating agencies. And then sections 3 and 4 are really the scoping. So there's a number of questions that we have listed here. We have to talk through internally whether it makes sense to make this a digital form, whether it makes sense to put, boxes in here, have people add an attachment that's just a narrative. Because this form originally it had some kind of hard formatting that made it a little squirrely to use. But the original form really forced the requester to jump around from what's the purpose to attending to a number of things that weren't related to what they'd actually do with the data. And then what they do with the data came so much later that as the reader, you want to know upfront, like what data do you, what are you going to do with it and how are you going to share it? And so we just reordered things. Section 3 is really the meat of the request, and section 4 is all of the security plus some extra security questions. So requesters now have to submit a data security plan. And then there's a few questions here that we've added that actually aren't included in the security plan that have to do with just applicable laws that really aren't as much about the sort of hardware security, privacy that you have to attend to, as well as, are there anything else that we need to know about, like the identification or anonymization? So those are 2 questions that aren't reflected in the security plan that were in the original form. So we can share this with folks. We wanted you to know we've made some of these revisions and are hoping to sort of put this out into the wild pretty soon. And I can send you both forms if you wanted to kind of make a comparison. But we'd be taking feedback on this pretty quickly because, as Katie said, we have a lot going on and we have requests that are imminent. And so the sooner we can move into a more streamlined requesting order for this request, the better. That's my quick update. Thank you for listening to me. Sorry, of course.
Are there any questions about the request form?
The middle, that section 3, there's a lot of questions listed and it looks long, but people attend them pretty naturally in the writing. So I'm not too worried. Let's make sure.
Are there any final thoughts or questions, comments about this section? Not, we're gonna move on to the policy discussion. So, so a few of us participated in the SLDS data governance policies and processes workshop in December. We took a lot away from it. And so a big focus of this group, in addition to the data requests and the systems, it's about developing processes and policies that make the system function. And so one of the pretty stark takeaways that we had is that we need to separate them. So in the last few years, we've really combined the policy and process documents and approach to this policy development, and we're going to separate them out. You know, we want to make sure that we are adequately identifying the what and the why of the policy, and getting that addressed, and then when it is appropriate, and finally return to the process, because not everything's going to happen, especially as we're exploring new and different ways of doing things. Processes can change pretty quickly. So using that, so from the SLDS workshop, the value of developing data policies in the system, again, separate from processes, is that we can codify our definition and commitment to rules. We can create a framework for decision-making and establish accountability for managing data across the agencies or states. For obviously in our situation, we won't be managing data for agencies, but how data is used and managed for P21 data requests. Ensure compliance with relevant state laws, federal laws and regulations. This is especially important as we start building this secure data enclave. We want to make sure that we have built a strong foundation for it to function, making sure that the build and environment is compliant with the work that we're doing. And so the approach to these policies is the what and the why. So we want to make sure that our policies are clearly illustrating a set of guiding principles or rules to establish a direction, the statements of what and or why. This is the document that would be approved by the data governing board. Like I said, that we would be identifying the rules and parameters of accountability that we all agree to. And so it gives us the ability to operate with accountability, and so that we all know and understand what those priorities are. So, like I said, high level, allowing for some discretion in implementation. So again, the process is separate. So how we do something is a different process entirely. It should change infrequently. So we'll be discussing a couple of the existing policies that we haven't really reviewed in the last year or two. And this will require approval from this board, which is not unusual. We have voted on policies in the past. We are just moving forward, separating out the process, which will still happen, which will still come to this board. It just won't be like a formal approval process. So the way that we understand this is that these policies that we're building states the values of the data governing board, establishes guidelines, changes them frequently. So examples are the rules of the road, stop sign, yield sign, red light, green light, and building code. I don't know off the top of my head any building code. And whereas on the process side, it's the work in action. It's how we're going to do something. It's the route to the destination, and the actual steps to like do it. So just kind of wanted to level set on the policy side of things, because as we build this secure data enclave, we need to establish policies so that we can use it. But also we have policies that we should just in general have set up for the system as a whole, regardless of the technology we are using to share and match data. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions, comments? Okay, cool. All right, so these are the current policies that we have in place that have been approved by the data governing board. So we have metadata management. It was the first policy that this board approved a couple of years ago. We have not revisited since we approved this, but we do have the data dictionary, which sort of is informed by the metadata policy, but it is time for a refresh. And the plan is that we will, between now and April, review this policy to see if we need to make any changes to it. If it doesn't need to be changed, that's great. And if we need to make revisions, like the April board meeting will be the time to do this. The pre-publication review we just passed a few months ago. So I think it's still relatively new. We're using it. It is not quite ready to be refreshed. Data security approved by the data governing board definitely needs a refresh. We haven't revisited it since we made changes to the incident response plan. And so again, between now and May, the plan will be to review it and then determine if there are any changes that need to be made to it. The data security policy is very likely going to be informed by the work being done by the data security committee. But again, like the data governing board is responsible for approving these policies. And so it's important that we have everybody's feedback on this. And then the incident response plan has been approved by the data governing board. It definitely needs to be updated as we've added new agencies, as there have been staff turnover. So those minor changes really don't need to be approved, but the content of it should be reviewed. And then, you know, ideally, this will be work that is done with the different the two data security and data privacy subcommittees. So that's the schedule coming up for these existing policies. Does that make sense? Is there anything missing?
So I guess the only question I would have is, do we need to think about maybe scheduling more than an hour for both the April and the May meetings?
Oh,
If we're gonna have other things on the agenda? Because I think we'll need. Just a thought.
if we were to extend the meetings by 30 minutes, would that ruin anybody's Friday? I'm gonna assume silence is like enthusiasm. Cool. So great idea, Patrick. So I will update those upcoming meetings to make sure that we have. Yeah.
We have a chance to think about them in advance, like not just have, I'm really glad we're discussing it here, but then like to be able to have the draft or whatever.
Oh, yes, no, everything's gonna, like, we'll be soliciting feedback between now and April and now and May. And so that whenever feedback we receive between now and then, we can discuss at the meeting to make sure that we're like all on the same page and then ideally vote to approve it. Like it's already approved, so the revisions, the refresh will hopefully like bring it into our current existence. But yeah, we're gonna, like, I'll share everything next week. You're gonna get so much from me. The next week or two. You're gonna get so much material. But yeah, like, if you have time between now and the next meeting, like, please review it, provide feedback, so that when we do have the meetings in April and May, we're prepared to review to approve. My request.
You have to review and discuss and make final changes.
Well, yeah, review and discuss. If there are no changes, then like there's nothing to.
Usually, we need a chance. You know, we're making changes on the fly, then see them in writing. That
We will share, yes. Yes, we will review and discuss, but ideally, like, the feedback that we get between now and then, which will be shared with everybody, will be in a format that is ready to like move on.
The one thing I'll say is that while especially for folks who are newer, and may not be as versed in the policies, the speed at which we're getting requests now and the breadth and amount that we have to manage, we won't have as much time. It's not that we don't have time to review, discuss and approve, but it's just really important that we don't let some of these discussions go on for longer because we'll be caught in the crosshairs of not knowing where data should go, for instance, because we don't have something. So.
Yeah.
That's really, we really are it's a very exciting time. There's so many people. We had a conversation yesterday with someone at the legislature who's, in a press conference says, because of the good work that happened with disconnected youth, we want to use this to do something else. And it's like, that's all we ever wanted is data to inform policy. So
Now we just want to make sure that people understand how people win. So, and it's good that and there's lots of opportunity for discussion. Like over that piece of it. Okay, so speaking of, so I shared a draft data quality policy with you all. Like today, we're just gonna go through to review the content of it. Are there questions? And so that ideally we can have feedback for this in a way that means we can proceed with it in one of the future. But this is a very different policy than we had in the past where we've expanded considerably. So I'm just gonna share my screen again. And hopefully we can go through it. But this is an opportunity to provide feedback, ask questions. We're not making any decisions about this today. I know everybody's busy, so I just want to make sure that. Okay, so for the draft data quality policy, agencies retain control and authority over the data that they collect. But as we've learned through our many data requests, that the quality of data is often a question that we receive from requesters, and it's not always a question that we are capable of answering. And so this policy is to ensure that all participating agencies have adequate documentation and processes to promote the availability of high quality data for data users. And then documentation of the process will help improve the data request process for everybody involved. One of the things that Rachel mentioned at a past meeting was that the disclosure review process really brought to light many questions about the data, that it didn't always reflect what was requested, that it didn't always match the data dictionary that's been shared with us. And so this is an opportunity to just get a more comprehensive understanding of the data that we're working with, so that when we are talking to data requesters, we can say, that actually doesn't exist, or if you really want that, it's better, like if you want to understand this element, you really need these additional components to provide context. So any questions so far? Okay. So specifically for the participating agencies, we are asking that you provide documentation to the operating group on the quality of the data you collect, and have the authority to share. And so obviously there will have to be a separate process document where we provide guidelines for how to share that with us. But right now, like the high level view is for you to provide that documentation on the quality of your data. And also develop data quality policies at your own agencies if they don't already exist. And if they do exist, please share them with us. But it could include a description of the processes in place, documentation of any known issues or considerations, and a description of your process for checking data quality. We've included the Indiana Performance Hub created data quality dimensions for how they determine how to measure the quality of your data. Is that anything? There it is. Okay, some of these. So as we develop this policy, it might be useful to include something comparable. Like Indiana has created. Do you want to think about the dimensions?
The dimensions they took, these are mostly from, there's a framework for data governance that they took them from, that's the Data Canvas acronym, I can't remember what it stands for. But Indiana took those from that. And it's a useful way to, like, every time we've had discussion about this, people are like, what does data quality mean? And then it's a useful way to like break it down into some of the components, and you can think like, some of these are, the language is written, for the private sector, doesn't necessarily apply here. But you can think of it as like, how do you think about quality for administrative data broken down into different ways? You know, is the data provided on a voluntary basis, so it's missing elements because people don't want to provide some information to your agency, like there's very good reasons that happens, and such understanding, okay, like this will be missing something because this data is voluntary, looking at consistency across agencies. So they like, are the standards for demographic data the same from court support services to correction? Like, are those things that line up? So it's just a way of taking data quality and breaking down into some components so that then we're able to understand better the data quality when someone, you know, gets data out of the whole process.
And if this is a chance too, if such a document doesn't exist at your agencies already, to sort of memorialize things that we learned that you might already know. So things like, oh, our system got updated in this year. And so previous year, the quality of the data are not super reliable. And that was something that came up with the disconnected youth. We asked for, you know, a number of years of data. And in that time, many people had gone through different system changes. So if there was documentation you knew of that came with your data, or that even, you know, what the data dictionary things we could share with requesters, you know, we know that information now because we asked it, but we can't hold on to that information, you know, for every request that we receive. So.
Is there thoughts of augmenting the data dictionary to be able to collect, you know, this information alongside it?
Yeah, that's it. That's like things we're going to be coming to everyone. Once we get the report settled, that's one thing that we plan to circle back to agencies to talk through. Disclosure review broadly, how can we enhance the data dictionary? And that's sort of where some of these things can put.
I think for the distinction Kate's making earlier about policy and process, like that's sort of the process part of it. So like this is the idea, the concept, we want to make sure we understand data quality, and then the process part is like, all right, how does that actually work? It's going to go into like this template that somebody built out and it goes into the data dictionary.
And that might work for your agency, maybe like, I'll spit all the data dictionary, and another agency might be like, you know, I'm gonna make a statement will always just go with if anyone requests, here's what you should know. So if, you know, how you want to do it doesn't matter to us as long as we attend to the element of the quality. Thanks, Brian.
Any agent, I think we asked this before and the answer is no, but it's worth asking. Do any agencies have a data quality policy where you have to do it for some reason? You have something internal or something that seems similar to this?
We have a process document that covers pretty much all of these areas. It's not a policy.
Yeah, okay, or something that's like similar. Yeah.
And that would be great if you could like share that with us, because then maybe we just sort of would create some shell of that and use that across. So, again, we don't really want to start everything from scratch. So if there are examples of this at other agencies, that would be great. And does this make sense? Okay, so you all have a Word version of this policy document. I don't have any deadlines for feedback yet, but we already have other policies that need to be addressed in the next few meetings. But we will definitely be returning to this. Please, as you have a chance to review this policy, send feedback to me. That would be great. And really hearing from every agency is really important to make sure that we're covering everything. Anything else on this? No. All right, I'll go back to showing slides. We have one. So in addition to this body addressing these different individual policies, we have subcommittees that kicked off yesterday that will also be responsible for recommending policies that we need. So yesterday we kicked off the data security and data privacy subcommittees. It was a really good meeting. We reviewed the charters and really set some expectations. The next meetings will be scheduled via Doodle in the next week or two. But they'll be meeting pretty regularly. And we'll have a joint meeting, or all of the subcommittees will have joint meetings for peer learning opportunities. But we anticipate that many of the recommendations that come from these subcommittees, in addition to like technical and user requirements, are also policies that are necessary to make the new data enclave functional. And that it's making sure that that environment is in compliance with the needs of and requirements of our participating agencies. Not much else to say there. I know a few of you were at that kickoff, so I don't know if anybody wants to make some comments about the. We can keep moving. Because we have Adriana here who is working specifically on the.
I just sort of did. No, that's, I mean, he got it, we're gonna open up something. So like Katie mentioned, we were just talking about the policy development and all the policy work that y'all are gonna be working on for the to continue the data governance that already kind of exists here, but to continue enhancing it. The other side of it is really this move to the technology side, and that's where the security enclave comes in. So if you look in your board packet somewhere, there's a little brief of the project, and it's like people sent earlier, so you might have a digital copy somewhere. And this, the purpose of this brief is really to give folks sort of an overview of the project and sort of give you some insight to where we are. I think also maybe the digital version of, maybe not this packet or the one on how the DISC report was in there, and really the inception of this project, the work that was done in collaboration with this to do sort of an assessment of the P20 WIN system and make some recommendations as to how we can consider some changes so that we can enhance the security and privacy of the information that we are collecting, sharing, analyzing for the purposes of P20 WIN. So I'm going to go over the project brief quickly, and I will focus mostly on the project objectives and phases that allow us to kind of see a little bit of a timeline. You'll see that in the timeline there is estimated and there's asterisks. The purpose of that is to really just sort of state that we are working in collaboration with our BITS partners, Bob is here, on this project. So we really have to sort of collaborate together and work on timeline and all that kind of good stuff. So this is a sort of like a first view of the project and where we are now, just to give folks an understanding of how this project is going to really work together with the subcommittees and in the policy development that y'all are going to be going. So I'll read through some pieces of the overview, just to kind of like here. So the P20 WIN Executive Board approved the creation of a secure data enclave to centralize and automate data storage and matching for data requests. So that is what we're doing here. That is the purpose of the enclave. So let me see here. I'll skip over to the project objectives. So the objectives of the project is first and foremost to develop and deploy an in-house secure data enclave for the purposes of sharing, storing, and analyzing data for P20 WIN data requests. The second one here is to also take a look at the existing policies and procedures for P20 WIN data requests to support the appropriate build and use of the secure data enclave. So that's the policy component of this. And then the last part, there's actually another objective I'll add in here, but we're going to identify specific users for the enclave. There will be some culmination of folks that are already sort of in the P20 WIN process. We'll just define and design sort of roles for data requesters, how they will interact with the secure data enclave. Then there's another objective that I got feedback from Scott on that isn't on your project brief, but it's important to sort of mention here. P20 WIN is really a large system that has sort of a lot of eyes on it, and we hope for it to continue to grow. So it's actually a really good space to serve as a model for how we can think about using policy to inform technology that allows us to build systems that are safe and secure. So this collaboration between the data governing board, our BITS team, and all of you is really going to serve as a sort of an example of doing something that's actually pretty difficult, trying to build a system that is informed by policy and also vice versa. So it's actually really exciting to have our BITS team sort of participate in this process and learn about the policies at the same time that we're going to be developing the enclave. It's really exciting stuff. From my experience in the private sector, these things sort of happen really far apart from each other, and that's how you kind of run into issues at the end of it. So this is exciting stuff to be seeing in the public sector. I'm going to move quickly over to the project phases, and again, these are rough phases. And I'll talk a little bit about where we are now. We've drafted a project plan, and really the project plan is for the purposes, again, to start having conversations with our partners and our stakeholders and start talking about, does this make sense? Is this timeline, ridiculous, or is this something that is feasible? What are the resources that we would need? How do we collaborate with the data governing board and other folks? So right now in January and February, we're going to be sort of in our planning phases, and we shared with the subcommittees yesterday that we are going to be reaching out to P20 agencies to gather additional more refined requirements for the enclave. So we'll sort of have space for the agencies to give their feedback and really inform us about the ways that they secure data in their specific agencies to make sure that we are as compliant as we can be when building the enclave. March through May, we have some time slated for the actual development of the enclave. It's my understanding that we have a pilot environment that we're going to take a look at and just see what additional refinements we would need to make based on the requirements that we gather from agencies. We have the summertime to do some testing, and that is sort of, initial testing and then potentially getting some feedback on the functionality and testing against some of the requirements. And we're looking at hopefully August, September-ish for implementation. That meaning we're starting to think about training users of the enclave and bringing people up to speed. And we'll have a transition plan, of course, because you can't, just say, here's this enclave and, everybody go and use it. Now there has to be some sort of plan to get people from the existing structure of, P20 data requests, what y'all are already used to doing, and get people sort of used to new procedures. So that'll be a whole plan, a lot of communication. Our intention is to keep this board along with the executive board as informed as possible, all the changes that are sort of happening with that. And that's sort of where we are now. The rest of the brief really just talks about the roles of the project and what we sort of scoped down here. So you have myself serving as a project manager. Of course, you have Katie, who's really been sort of like the brains of what is P20 Win and how do we sort of move it over to an environment that is safer. We have approvers here, Scott, Patrick will be serving in a role to approve this project plan and just make sure that all this makes sense for DOL as they are, partners that are matching for the data sort of happens. Our contributors, like I said, we have FITS. We hope to engage with agency legal. Of course, we'll have the privacy and security subcommittees that are going to be contributing to the policy development, which will inform the bills of the enclave. And of course, OPM is on there. We hope to collaborate with our other partners in that to get additional feedback on, the direction that we're sort of moving. And like I mentioned, we will keep the data governing board and the executive board informed. I know that was a lot, really not very high level. I would say question.
Yeah, so I think my first question is, this does necessitate updates to our legal.
Oh, definitely.
Well, certainly.
That's why that subcommittee hasn't kicked off yet.
What's that?
That's why that subcommittee comes later, because this will affect that.
Well, I guess in the timeline, I think there should be some reference to the fact that
We wouldn't be able to.
the agency legals have to review this and OAG, I mean, I imagine, we're all gonna huddle up and figure out how to actually make this.
That makes sense.
So
Yeah, for sure.
I think the phases should have some reference to.
We can talk through the anticipated timing for that too, so.
Mhm.
No, but
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to know.
Yeah, we can add it, we'll definitely add it to the timeline. Right now, we have the data security and data privacy subcommittees like kicking off. Could we anticipate some of the things that we learn in those meetings will impact the legal agreement? So we want to make sure that we have a few meetings done so that when we do convene a legal subcommittee, we can just be like, this is what we understand for individual agencies from our one-on-ones. This is what we need to learn from the different subcommittees for privacy and security purposes. This is sort of what we imagine the agreements could look like, and then we'll work with the subcommittee to make sure that those are good.
Because we haven't yet talked about like specifically what we're storing in the enclave. Yeah, right?
Right.
Correct. It is request dependent, I think, right? So
Yeah.
sort of like what goes there really depends on the nature of who's asking and what their security, like what their security looks like on their end.
Yeah. Yeah, I think our first approach is really focused on making sure that we can fulfill data requests. So like those first close with the data sets first and approve data requests. How that evolves is to be determined, but that's just kind of how we've been looking at it for like this initial build.
Thank you. What was your name?
But you,
Thank you. Y'all can say your name and ask the question so I can get to know people. That's awesome. Thank you.
Dan, did you have a question?
Wasn't a question, I was just sort of tacking on, resonating with some of the questions that I'm Jan, that we also haven't talked, we haven't talked about what's gonna be like stored, and we also haven't talked about that back the patch, what
Right.
potential persistent linking might be, would that be utilized, would that not be utilized? That's a sort of really big question technically that will affect options.
We're aware, and we anticipate those conversations will happen in the subcommittees and will happen here. Make sure that everybody is aware of the changes that may need to be made, and obviously, like, however we move forward with persistent linking, everybody has to be on that. Like, everybody has to agree on that process, so that's definitely gonna be a big conversation. We're preparing for that.
Loosely, and I'm just gonna make sure Katie doesn't tell me that I'm wrong about it. But the legal agreement, what we're planning, and it's not reflected here, but it's easy enough to add, is again, there is going sort of in parallel, but we spend time figuring out how does the data sharing process change, what data is stored, what data is not stored, understand, get that ironed out before we dig into the legal agreements in depth. And so that's like lesson learned from last time. I think like changing the process of legal agreements at the same time is kind of messy. So we spent some time up front on that. But then the second half of this, our hope, and I don't know whether we'll be able to do this, but we would redo the enterprise MOU data sharing agreements like mid-year at the same time that this kind of the technical side goes. So legal agreements are going to be a little slower, but you will also start getting outreach very soon. Okay, making sure we understand your individual agency requirements, and a couple of you we've talked with already to understand like, okay, our agency needs X, Y, and Z. We've got that also laid out because that will help with the development of the enclave. It'll also just help with the legal agreements, understanding all the different variations for the agencies, which I think we have documented, but things change, people need it. It's just worth making sure we've got a refresher.
yeah, and I think differentiate, I like that, so that when we go to the lawyers, we're clear like how it's all gonna work and what is gonna move.
Yeah.
They're gonna deal with it, which I think is great. I think it would also be helpful to be very clear for a person like me, like what's the difference, like what matching data, what happens with the matching data versus the matched data.
I'll just say again, the matching I think is and Jan, correct. And the matching is the most challenging part of this. And so like when Adriana was listed over, you're saying through September. So we're not 100% sure when that's going to get done. That could be in the like June to September bucket because the matching is just such a complex change to make. I think it's possible to do some of that sooner. But that's the huge challenging part of it, and we have to sit down and figure out.
May I ask, just, obviously, we're looking at making all these policy changes, so I'm interested in knowing where we are with the resident advisory board. I think that, obviously, the community voice is critically important to us thinking about how any of these policies would need to be implemented.
We are engaging with a consultant who's gonna help us kick that off. Hopefully,
And that in line with our timeframes, so we'll
it
be sure.
should.
So all of these will have that.
Everything will just converge. But yeah, that's definitely something we're still working on. Okay. So we'll keep you updated. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and Adriana or anyone else. We want to make sure that everybody is clear on what is happening. Okay, so then the next item, totally changing directions, the research collaboratives.
So a couple of updates to offer, and some things to preview. Part of the work of the current grant, so the 2023 grant, is to establish a research collaborative. So we've been talking a lot about security and privacy and all modernization work that's been happening. That's all in service of trying to learn and match data to answer questions that are relevant to state policy priorities. So in order to do this work, we sort of need to surface more questions. Not that we really want more requests right now because we have so many, but and also identify researcher capacity. So if folks aren't familiar with the research collaborative piece of the work, we can surface that part of the grant narrative so people can just kind of refresh their memories. But we've been doing some work around this in earnest, maybe not directly for the past over a year. So on the next slide, I just wanted to offer up the things that we've been doing since basically the fall of 2023. In order to identify researcher capacity, we really need to start working with researchers out in the field to make sure that they're aware that P20 WIN exists, that our team exists, that how they can access and engage with the state as a partner. So we did a number of roadshows, we call them. We met with the University of Connecticut faculty, the faculty through CSCU. We went Council of Independent Colleges, and we made a trip to the Children's Center at Yale. We did sort of a roadshow, how do you access data, and partner with us to do all kinds of interesting research. And through those experiences, connected with folks to learn a little bit more about what their needs are as researchers. So we can understand how we actually engage folks. Is there remuneration that they need? Is it just pure partnership that they're looking for? And I actually didn't list this here, but the Tobin Center also did a survey of researchers, which I'm pretty sure we presented those findings to this group. So I'll add that here too, just for documentation purposes. We spent time updating our learning agenda, going back over a year as a group. So the learning agenda now reflects a really diverse set of agencies we have engaged in the whole partnership. And I've worked with some folks who have American Rescue Plan funding agencies represented here around evaluation of their American Rescue Plan funded work. So we have some experience now in engaging evaluators and applied researchers and doing research on behalf of the state. So we have some experience with successful RFPs that we issued that garnered more than just one response. Really exciting. So I've been doing some exploration internally around procurement, and all of this work has really led us to the next phase of the research collaborative development. I talked with Ajit too about the work that's been happening with CSERT. The model's a little bit different than I think what we're able to achieve here at OPM, just without the CSERT is the education research collaborative that happens through State Department of Education, and a lot of that work happens through a partnership with NEAG, School of Education at UConn. So they do a lot of the administration. We will unlikely in the first iteration of this have a university partner. So we would be doing some work on behalf of the agency. So our plan right now, and I wanted to offer a brief update because I know we're low on time, we have more things to talk about, is that we're going to start doing some outreach. And I wanted to maybe spend a minute or so today fielding some questions about the work. But we're going to be returning to agencies to really have you look back at the learning agenda that we've revised. That's our statement of our priorities. It can be a learning agenda, can and should be. It's flexible and iterative, so it can be adjusted over time. And if there's any questions that are of real keen interest to your agencies, our plan is to start to draft and put together initial questions for an initial RFP. And we'll issue on behalf of the state. Part of the budget for the grant includes funding for researchers, and we have now an understanding what some of their needs are. So we don't know how many questions will be included in that RFP, but initially we're thinking maybe 5 projects. We're looking to solicit interest in. And we can work around drafting that, developing that RFP. We hope to share it with the executive board, obviously, before we release it. But the idea is that that RFP would contain 5 discrete potential research projects of interest to agencies who are part of P20 WIN that are either on learning agenda now or in service of some other learning and research goal that you have. If we don't get a response from an external party, we also have an internal team to provide some research capacity, and those are sort of things that we can explore. But the real exciting development, I think, after the disconnected youth work is that partner agencies are starting to see all of our work is beneficial to you too, not just the service of outside questions. And so we already have some requests from internal partner agencies around match data that they want to use internally. So the research collaborative is meant to generate information that can be used in your own agency's advocacy or understanding of your programs. And so the next steps here, we'll sort of surface, and our follow-up materials will remind everyone about what's in our learning agenda. And then I'll be reaching out sort of direct, like one-on-one with agencies to just talk through, is there anything that you're interested in pursuing that you know you don't have the capacity to support, and how could we potentially include that in our first RFP effort? If we have so many that we have more than 5, then we'll have to think a little bit about prioritization. But for now, I think the first solicitation phase will be new for everyone, so we'll see where we land. That's our update on the work to date. Questions? Ideas?
I think it's great that you're prioritizing the needs of the agencies and their requests.
I'm excited about that. And I have to say, Jen, it's really exciting, like the ones that we've received from agencies, we're like, yes, this is what this is about. And I think that it's hard when you, especially for your agencies, when you join this partnership, at first you're like, oh, we have to be responsive to, Scott, do you want to show it to you very quick? Okay. If you want to be responsive to the requests and you want to be responsive to the questions, but you do have things you're curious about. And that came up so much in the disconnected youth work. It was like, well, actually, we want to know about it in this way or that way. And so now this is the point of doing the work. And the fact that we have the funds to do it too, the Tobin survey showed us that like researchers are always looking for remuneration. So it's not a lot. It's not like they're looking for, like big giant grants. Sometimes it's just enough money to maybe buy out courses or have a graduate student help them with the work. And partnering with you could set up a longer term partnership over time. That's the other kind of really exciting thing is there are folks who really do want to work with the state and access to information that they can help you with is sort of a resident. Awesome. So we're excited about the work. So I will be reaching out, you're hearing from me. Now you know what it's about, and don't feel pressure to participate in this initial RFP if you want to like see how it goes and you'd rather, like let somebody else be the first one out there, that's fine too. I mean, I think because now we understand the RFP process and how reviews go, I think that it won't be as onerous as I know if you think of an RFP, you're like, oh, it's taking so long and it's so stressful. And we were able to run the evaluation RFP reviews pretty quickly. And so I feel confident that we have a good sort of formula for it.
And so Richard, when are you reaching out to folks for the timeline yet?
The next couple of weeks, like by the end, we're January 31st today, so month of February.
Okay. So obviously, I mean, my register is pretty large, so I would probably need to send something out to folks to get a sense across the various divisions. So obviously need to think about timing with folks to get back to me, because I can't necessarily know across the entire of the agency what questions folks have, so I want to, have a fair solicitation.
That makes a lot of
Then
sense.
just be like somebody.
And I would also say that I would prioritize questions where there's information available sort of more readily, because I think sometimes we have questions and then we're like, oh, but there's like a pre-prep process that has to happen. Maybe those can go in the second RFP we do.
Yeah.
But I think that's totally, and now we know I'm reaching out. I'll probably get to meeting probably later in February, so you have some time. Scott, you're
Thank you.
One thing, some agencies may have, and I think DSS might be one of these agencies, you have your own internal, like research or learning agenda set of priority questions. If that's already placed in some fashion, that would be wonderful to kind of learn from and build up.
And remember, this is for interagency sharing questions, right? Like, so some of the questions we fielded when we started revising the learning agenda were really sort of like inside the house questions, which, we would love to also support, but we're focused obviously on the matching part. But But that's a good question, Susan. So, I think springtime is possible. I really do think like springtime for an RP release is possible. So that would mean sometime later this year, resources to answer some of these questions in advance of next session. So that's doable.
And I know how our, procurement processes go, but I do hope that, we have ways of also ensuring that more diverse, entities and universities also potentially are aware of this and have opportunity. So obviously they don't need necessarily be in state.
So, yeah,
I'll
I'll say this much, one of the shortcomings of the RFP process is that if we're the issuing agency, then we have a limited number of, promotion opportunities. So it doesn't mean that member agencies or other folks and both like colleagues.
Or even our other, we've made relationships, with, ask people, and, I think we have different folks also, potential just, hey, making them aware and they can use their networks as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that's our goal, is to make sure that there's amplification. But I have been told by the procurement team that there's a limit to what we can do as a.
No, I understand.
It's very hard. Message discipline is important, but not instructive. Yeah. Thank you.
So I know that we're at time. We did not take too long. I can make it a super brief
Oh, yeah.
marketing update. So as you know, we've been working with Cronin Associates on a new communications and marketing plan for P21. Thank you to who participated in those interviews. It was a good learning opportunity. They're in the process of developing a brief and creative brief for how to, for the direction that we should be going in. Think based on all of your feedback, it became clear. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this out loud. Okay. It became clear that the name is outdated and nobody understands what it means, even people who have used data from P20 So in addition to that, though, we'll be working on visuals, a new name, and some other materials that we can be using for a communications plan, plus different ways that we can talk about P20 with it, whatever its new name is. But the fact that we are a very human-centered effort, but we do not communicate that in any of our communications, the website, nothing. And really trying to re-center that as part of the focus for the system. So it's a very brief update. We will probably have concepts to share and are looking forward to your feedback.
Yeah, definitely before the next meeting. No decisions will be made around this. Is a big decision. But we were told to our faces by someone in the legislature yesterday that the name, what were her exact words?
Made to us, guys.
Yeah.
It was dumb. And it was dumb.
As a person who understands when it was formulated, I also think it's done. I just want to. Never liked. So make sure everybody knows that.
Got it.
Oh, that's excellent. So that is, all right, since I have all of your attention still. Next week, we are going to the SLBS Best Practices Conference. Like Rachel said, she's doing a presentation on the Disconnected Youth Report. I'll be doing a presentation on modernizing the P20 system based on a lot of the work that Adriana and I are doing, plus the feedback we've gotten from all of you. And part of my plan is to crowdsource data matching, how other states do it. So hopefully we'll get some helpful feedback during that session. And next, we are done.
Need a motion? Need a motion to adjourn?
No,
Okay.
no, the executive board.
Got it.
So thank you everyone for joining us on the meeting. They tend. We'll be here. We're leaving.
Oh.
And thank you for Fred and Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
I have a question.
Please, let's move down.